So we hear the word narcissist literally all the time, right? It's everywhere. But in today's explainer, we're actually going to take a step back and dive into Carl Jung's incredibly profound, highly structured architecture of the mind. We really want to uncover what this term actually means beneath the surface. We're going to break down these mental mechanics in a way that is clear, structured, and honestly, just absolutely fascinating.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever met this person? Like, have you ever loved or worked for, maybe even grown up with someone who is just intensely charming? You know, they're always the most interesting person in the room. But then, suddenly, they run abruptly cold. It's like they have this uncanny ability to make you feel like the absolute center of the universe in one breath, and then in the very next conversation, they treat you like you don't even exist.
Well, today, we usually call that person a narcissist. But let's be real, on social media, that definition has gotten completely diluted. It gets thrown around as a generic label for literally anyone who's difficult or acting selfishly. But what's really fascinating here is just how far this vague pop culture insult strays from the actual true psychological definition. It's basically lost all of its precision.
And that's where Carl Jung comes in, offering us a completely different paradigm. He didn't frame this around arrogance or selfishness at all. Instead, he defined this structure as the person who cannot see themselves. I mean, just think about the weight of that for a second. It completely rewires how we understand this, right? It moves us way past that surface-level grandiosity, down into a profound and frankly tragic lack of inner sight.
Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, Architecture of the False Self.
So Jung gives us two absolute key concepts here, the inflated persona and the shadow. Now, for most of us, a persona is really just a mask, right? Something we wear to navigate social situations. We put it on, we take it off, no big deal. But in the narcissistic structure, the person is literally fused with their mask. They aren't just wearing it anymore, they are it. And the wild part is, all the grandiosity of this inflated persona is basically just a cover for its exact opposite, the shadow. The shadow holds all the locked-away vulnerability, the inadequacy, the deep fear that they simply cannot afford to let anyone, and I mean especially themselves, ever see.
You're probably wondering, how does this actually happen? Well, this missing mirror dynamic usually kicks off in early childhood. And we're not necessarily just talking about simple neglect here. Often it's about a child who was seen, but they were seen incorrectly. They basically learned early on that love was strictly conditional on their performance. So because their genuine vulnerable self just wasn't acceptable, it was forced underground into the shadow by mid-childhood. And then by late childhood, this compensatory performance self develops to take its place. It's essentially a mask organized entirely around securing validation.
Which, of course, brings us to the question everyone always asks. Why don't they care? Why does empathy completely fail? Well, it's not actually a lack of neurological empathy. You see, true empathy requires a stable sense of self, right? You need that stability so you can step outside of yourself and imagine another person's inner experience. But for them, their inflated persona is just way too fragile. Maintaining this massive, grand performance takes so much constant, exhausting energy that they literally cannot afford the vulnerability of stepping outside themselves for even a second.
That brings us right into Section 2, the relationship cycle. If you have ever been in this dynamic, this progression is probably going to look painfully familiar. Idealization, devaluation, and discard. I really want to walk through this clearly because I want to show you that this isn't just random malice. It is a highly mechanical, deeply structured psychological process, and it's driven entirely by that exact internal architecture we were just talking about.
And this perfectly illustrates that cycle. Think about it. During idealization, to the partner, it feels like this intense, amazing true love. But psychologically speaking, the narcissist is actually projecting their own grandiosity onto you. You are essentially being used as a mirror. The warmth they're giving off is genuinely experienced, yes, but it's directed at you as a reflective surface, not as a separate, distinct person. And then the devaluation hits, right? It feels like you somehow failed them, but really, reality just set in. The mirror stopped reflecting their grandiosity perfectly, and boom, that becomes an immediate existential threat to their fragile persona.
Which leads us to a really painful dynamic known as shadow projection. Because they absolutely cannot acknowledge the inadequacy, the neediness, or the weakness that's locked away hidden in their own shadow, they unconsciously project it straight onto you. Suddenly, you become the one who is too needy, or too sensitive, or too demanding. See, acknowledging those traits in themselves would literally destroy their entire psychological structure, so they have absolutely no choice but to see those flaws in you instead.
Let's shift gears a bit for Section 3, the tragic dimension.
Just consider this endless cycle for a minute. performing specialness, endlessly seeking validation, and constantly hiding the shadow. The person who is trapped at the dead center of this is really not living well. It is an utterly exhausting, never-ending performance. And honestly, the saddest part of the whole shebang, the validation they receive never, ever actually satisfies them. Why? Because it's being given to the mask, not to the actual, genuine self that's buried deep underneath.
Now let's be absolutely clear here. The harm caused to partners and families is incredibly real, and those wounds are 100% valid. No doubt about it. But Jung's framework asks us to simultaneously hold space for this hidden tragedy. It is the self that never got to exist. Think about that. There is a vulnerable, genuinely real person in there who went underground very, very early in life and just remains locked away in the dark.
And that brings us to section 4, your own reflection.
If you have ever been the mirror in one of these relationships, I really want you to take this in. Seriously, hear this. The idealization was not a lie, and the devaluation was not about you. Like we said, the warmth and intensity were genuinely felt in the moment, but they were directed at a reflection. So when that devaluation happened, it wasn't some kind of proof that you weren't enough or that you somehow failed. It is simply evidence that you were with someone who is fundamentally incapable of seeing you, simply because they cannot even see themselves.
Jung would actually suggest that your pull toward this kind of dynamic tells you something really important about your own psychology. So your healing focus needs to turn inward. It's about looking at your own wounds around being seen. It's looking at your own early experiences with conditional love, and maybe your own deep hunger to be intensely idealized by someone else. Now, acknowledging this is absolutely not about blaming yourself. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. It's about empowering yourself, because the ultimate goal here is healing yourself, not fixing the narcissist.
Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, the ultimate healing.
For the narcissistic structure, true healing requires what is literally the most terrifying thing imaginable, the willingness to just stop performing, take off the mask entirely, and finally truly look at the shadow. Honestly, it rarely happens completely, mostly because the cost just feels way too high for them. But Jung left us with this incredibly poignant reminder. The person underneath, however buried, however heavily defended they might be, is always worth finding.
So we're going to leave you with this final question today. What does your own healing require? I really encourage you to take some time and reflect on your own shadows, and maybe your own masks too. If this explainer gave you the language for something you've been trying to understand for a long time, please share it with someone else who might need to see it. And definitely make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming explainers on the deep psychological frameworks that shape all of our lives. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and we'll see you in the next one.